It was impossible to supply all the wounded with tents. Rails were hauled and thrown in piles, and large fires built. The wounded were brought and lain by these fires. Men were wounded in every conceivable way, some with their arms shot off, some wounded in the body, some in the head. It was heartrending to hear their cries and groans. One poor fellow who was near me was wounded in the head. He grew delirious during the night and would very frequently call his mother. The poor fellow died before morning, with no mother near to soothe him in his dying moments or wipe the cold sweat from off his brow. I saw the surgeon amputate limbs, then throw the quivering flesh into a pile. Every once in a while a man would stretch himself out and die. Next morning, rows of men were laid out side by side for their soldiers' burial. From the night of December 31st, 1862, and into New Year's Day, Union and Confederate wounded began trickling into their lines for medical help. Traveling by their own strength or with help from their comrades, they sought some kind of relief from the agony bestowed upon them in battle on the first day. The first day had been bloody, but successful for the Confederates, who crushed the Union right flank and drove the Union troops back to the Nashville Pike. January 1st became a day of convalescing and planning. Welcome everyone to Have History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and the patrons on Patreon voted for me to animate the fighting on January 2nd during the Battle of Stones River, or Battle of Murfreesboro according to the Confederacy. If you would like to vote for the next animation, please head on over to the Patreon page and join for as little as $1, and you can cast your ballot. Corporal Hannaford of the 6th Ohio had been wounded during the fight on December 31st. He crawled to a safe location to take his final breaths, but as the day drug on and the battle came to a close, he found himself very much alive. He decided that an unsheltered night would mean death, so he fashioned a signal flag from a knit sleeping cap and a stick to get the attention of the ambulance corps picking up the wounded on the field. But to his dismay, none ever came within hailing distance. He concluded that the only way to save himself was to make his way to the field hospital. Reluctantly leaving my blanket, my haversack, and canteen as a prize for some fortunate rebel, I wandered away back toward our lines. Across those corn and cotton fields again, now strewn with the dead and wounded, our own blue and the rebel gray mingled together, heedless alike of the piteous calls and prayers from every side for the assistance I could not give, and of the perils of shot and shell whistling past me, and at last I reached the turnpike. Faint and exhausted, a little further down I came to a little low-log cabin, with its strip of red flannel fluttering before it to indicate its present use. Its 2 small rooms crowded hours before with the wounded and dying, and scores more sitting or lying around smoking fires on the outside. Ambulances were coming and going, freighted with the precious burden of maimed and helpless humanity, and still the wounded were accumulating constantly. Braxton Bragg hoped that his Southern army had bloodied Rosecrans enough that the Union commander would begin a retreat and he could then pursue the blue troops. But as January 1st ended, Bragg realized the Army of the Cumberland was not moving anywhere. The only place that the Union line had not been attacked was on its far left flank. Reconnoitering missions revealed that the Federal troops were on both banks of the river, occupying 2 hills vital to the Confederates carrying the field of battle. One rise on the east bank and one rise on the west bank. Bragg didn't get along with John C. Breckenridge, but it was the Kentuckians' division that was the freshest and capable of making the attack. Bragg also ordered 10 artillery pieces to augment the advance, but he also gave the Kentuckian the discretion of choosing the time of attack. Breckenridge, upon hearing his orders, rode to the location of the assault. On his way there, he met Generals Hardee and Polk. They talked about the attack near McFadden's Ford and concluded that it was too strong of a position to try to carry. Breckenridge, trying his best to comply with orders, went past his own picket line to investigate, a very dangerous situation for a general. Personally looking over the proposed ground, convinced the former vice president that the attack shouldn't be made. Bragg called on Breckenridge to meet with him, and for 2.5 hours the generals talked about the attack. Breckenridge tried to convince Bragg not to order the assault, but the Southern Army commander would not hear it. Bragg even told Breckenridge the time to attack, 4 p.m., about an hour before dark. The meeting ended at 2:30 and the division commander rode off to form his brigades. The time of the assault may have seemed odd, but there was logic in the timing. If Breckenridge's division could successfully take the hill near McFadden's Ford, darkness would prevent the Union from launching a counterattack. For Rosecrans, he began getting reports from Colonel Samuel Beatty that artillery and infantry were moving in his front and that it could result in a major attack. Beatty's division was on the east bank of the river, the troops Bragg wanted driven to the other side. Rosecrans acted quickly and by 3 p.m. had assembled 4 brigades in reserve behind Beatty, overlooking McFadden's Ford. 1 brigade from Brigadier General John Palmer's division, 2 brigades from Brigadier General James S. Negley's division, and Morton's Pioneer Brigade. Breckenridge had another problem appear within his division prior to the assault. Arriving on the field of battle an hour before the division was to step off, Gideon Pillow, an incredibly well-connected Tennessee politician, had used his political ties to gain a generalship in the Mexican-American War, and he did the same thing in the Civil War. He had been suspended in April 1862 by President Davis, and Pillow resigned in October of that same year. But Davis rescinded the resignation and allowed him to take command again. Pillow was also good friends with Braxton Bragg, one of the few the Army commander had, and it was that relationship that gained him command of a brigade under Breckenridge during the attack, replacing Colonel Joseph Palmer, a more competent commander. Breckenridge hit another snag when he wanted the artillery assigned to him to place themselves between the first-line brigades and the second-line brigades. Captain Robertson of the artillery refused to accommodate the division commander. Breckenridge then asked him to have his artillery follow close behind the second line, but again Robertson refused. He insisted that Bragg wanted his artillery to push forward only when the infantry had taken the hill on the east bank. Breckenridge had to relent, but his own divisional artillery would follow behind the second line. More drama encompassed the Confederate ranks when General Hanson, commander of the Orphan Brigade, heard the orders that Breckenridge passed down to him from Bragg. Hanson said the orders was tantamount to murder and that he would kill Bragg to prevent it from happening. Both Breckenridge and fellow brigade commander General Preston had to restrain Hanson. The regiments were instructed to load and fix bayonets. They were to close with the enemy, fire 1 volley, and then drive them with the bayonet. At about 4 p.m. the signal gun sounded and the Kentuckians' division stepped off, but a small pond next to the river slowed down the 6th Kentucky, so they lagged behind the rest of the brigade. Breckenridge himself followed close behind the Orphan Brigade, made up of mostly Kentuckians as they pushed forward. The Federal troops had thrown up makeshift breastworks, but were only able to get off a few small volleys before they began to fall back to the second line. The rebels surged forward and took much of the knoll that was their objective, but they had lost their commander. Breckenridge and his staff were within a few yards of Price's abandoned breastworks when they spotted Hanson, lying alone against a fence. A shell fragment had gashed his leg and sliced open the femoral artery. Breckenridge tried vainly to stop the bleeding, and his staff summoned an ambulance. It was a sight indelibly impressed on my memory, the dying hero, his distinguished friend and commander, kneeling by his side, holding back the lifeblood. All this under the fiercest fire of artillery that can be conceived made it ever memorable. The scene passed almost as quick as it takes to write it. General Hanson was promptly moved by the ambulance. Breckenridge was soon as alert and clear-headed as ever. Hanson knew that the wound was mortal and told the surgeon to leave him and tend to the wounded men of his brigade. While Hanson's bravery was admired by Breckenridge, the former vice president, as he watched over the first line, found General Gideon Pillow cowering behind a tree as his men exchanged volleys with the blue troops. The words used by Breckenridge to get Pillow back into line to lead the brigade can only be imagined, but the division commander was irate, especially after seeing how Hanson had acted. Both sides threw lead at one another, but the Confederate front line became entangled with one another. Additionally, they had compacted themselves into a small area, allowing 5th Brigade to deliver enfilade fire into Pillow's flank. The 20th Tennessee in the second line came to Pillow's rescue, along with Wright's artillery, and fought off the 44th Indiana and 13th Ohio. But that still did not solve the problem of intermingled regiments, so confusion reigned throughout the front line. There was not much else to do but move forward for the Confederates, but as the gray-clad troops prepared for a charge, the mascot of one of the Kentucky regiments in the Orphan Brigade, a dog named Frank, began chasing after a rabbit. A few of the Kentuckians raised a cheer of encouragement, then more until the entire line was yelling wildly. Believing they were about to be charged, the Federals unleashed a volley into the Kentuckians that flew over their heads, but it caused the rabbit to change directions toward the Kentuckians with Frank in hot pursuit. One soldier yelled, "Run, Cottontail, run! Had I no more a reputation to sustain than you, I would run too." Although the Union line was holding, it would not be doing so for long if help did not arrive. Beatty ordered Gratter's brigade forward to check the Confederate charge, and it worked, but a few Confederates had splashed across the river and threatened the Union flank. Fife's brigade began to waver when their commander was thrown from and dragged by his horse, injuring him badly. The Union left fell back, with Gross's brigade providing a safe place for the front line to fall back behind, but the Confederates were on the move. When Breckenridge's division began to break the Union lines earlier in the battle, the Union High Command went into work like a well-oiled machine behind the Union lines, creating one of the most heroic and determined actions of the war. Rosecrans exhausted his horse, riding around the battlefield rallying retreating men and ordering up reinforcements to support the Union left. Sweat poured from his face as he coordinated more brigades and artillery pieces. Major General Thomas Crittenden's chief of artillery, Captain John Mendenhall, performed a miraculous action by tirelessly assembling 45 pieces of artillery on the hill overlooking McFadden's Ford to halt the Confederate advance. The Union cannons roared a destructive fire into the approaching Southerner. A member of the 20th Tennessee described it as such. So it was here if a soldier ever saw the lightning and heard the thunderbolts of a tornado, at the same time the heavens opened and the stars of destruction were sweeping everything from the face of the earth. If he was in this charge, he saw it. A Union soldier wrote, "The very earth trembled as with an exploding mine, and a mass of iron hail was hurled upon them. The artillery bellowed forth such thunder that the men were stunned and could not distinguish sounds. There were falling timbers, crashing arms, and whirring of missiles in every direction. The bursting of the dreadful shell, the groans of the wounded, the shouts of the officers mingled in one horrid din that beggars description. It stopped Breckenridge's division in its tracks, and for many of the Southerners, the devastation was too much to withstand again. They broke and ran for cover, the blue troops chasing after and capturing hundreds, and shot the ones who would not surrender in the back. Artillery shells exploded all around the retreating men. One soldier on his way back to safety attempted to commandeer a riderless horse, but as he grabbed the reins, a shell carried away its head. Breckenridge's artillery that had advanced with the infantry was put in a horrible situation as the infantry retreated. Wright's battery on the far right attempted to halt the Federals so the infantry could get away, but at about 70 yards away, he ordered the pieces to limber. But as they were about to ride away, he ordered them to unlimber and fire double canister. The cannoneers did as they were told. The enemy troops were too close, and the guns were captured. Other guns were able to get away, but Captain Wright would be killed. Breckenridge watched in horror as his division limped back to safety. He exclaimed, "My poor orphans, my poor orphans." The success felt by the Confederates on December 31st gave way to defeat by nightfall on January 2nd. The next day, Bragg would begin his retreat to Tullahoma, Tennessee. The Union lost 12,906 men, 1,677 killed, 7,543 wounded, 3,686 missing and captured. The Confederacy lost 11,739 troops, 1,294 killed, 7,945 wounded, and 2,500 missing and captured, totaling over 24,000 casualties in one battle. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to vote on the next battle, please go to the Patreon page and join.
Historian, historian, where do you roam? Historian, historian, far, far from home. Have history will travel reads the card of a man, a professor with knowledge in the heartland. To educate the world is his mission. A professor of fortune is a man called historian. Historian.